Hey there, this is Dennis Anyone with Dennis Hensley. It's a podcast about making things up and making things happen. I love talking to creative people of all stripes. I love to know what they do, how they do it, why they hang in there, how they hang in there. And today my guests, I have two guests actually. They're from a movie called Conversion. It's a documentary about conversion therapy. And I have Zach Miners, who is the filmmaker, and he's also one of the subjects of the documentary. And I also have Elena Joy, one of the other subjects of the documentary. I've seen a fair amount of documentaries and reports about conversion therapy. I'm not a fan, and I don't think most people with any sense are. But this documentary was powerful because it really put you in the shoes of the people that had been through it. Zach and Elena, and there's also a third person in the documentary, Dustin Rayburn, who you may know from Drag Race as Dusty Ray Bottoms. Dusty's story is told as well. So it was very personal. It's a beautifully made documentary. I was particularly drawn to Elena's story because she was a Mormon wife in Arizona, and I was raised Mormon in Arizona. So we did a lot of Mormon bonding, or ex-Mormon bonding, I guess you would say. But it was a powerful documentary. It showed me things about this world that I didn't know before, and I was really glad I got to talk to Zach and Elena. But before I get to the interview, I want to remind you that this podcast, Dennis Anyone, is brought to you by me. I do it because I love it, and if you want to support it, I would love that. There are a few things you can do. You can go to DennisAnyone.net, and you can leave a tip in my virtual tip jar, Venmo, PayPal, help me cover my expenses. I always appreciate that. There's also a new thing on there, relatively new. It's called Buy Me a Coffee. You can click on that and just buy me a coffee. And I love it because I do a lot of work in coffee shops, and it makes me feel like, oh, cool. I love it. Somebody liked that interview. That makes me feel good. The other thing you can do is become a subscriber to DNR Studios. I'm part of a group of shows under the Derek and Romaine Crazy Queer banner, and for a monthly fee, you get my show early, and you get all these other great shows. So you can learn about that at dnrstudios.com. All right, that's enough of the plugs. Here now is the interview with Zach Miners and Elena Joy from the movie Conversion, which is currently available on VOD. Joining me now are two of the subjects of the documentary Conversion. We've got the filmmaker Zach Miners coming to us from Louisville, Kentucky. Hi, Zach.
Hey, Dennis. How's it going?
It's going good. And we've also got Elena Joy, who is located in Phoenix, Arizona. She's one of the other subjects of the documentary Conversion, which is about conversion therapy. Welcome, both of you, to the podcast.
Thank you.
I'm excited to talk to you, although your movie infuriated me. For probably the reasons that one might be infuriated. I feel like I've seen things about conversion therapy before, but there was something about your movie that felt fresh. I think it was because you focused on three people. And so you really got to go on journeys with three different people. Zach, you're one of them. Elena is one of them. And talk to me about the third. Remind me, it's Dustin?
Dusty. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dusty Ray Bottoms is an incredible drag queen that was the first person to talk about conversion therapy on a national scale on the TV show RuPaul's Drag Race. And it was that, I think that was when Zach's first time was kind of understanding what conversion therapy was and that he had been through it. Is that right, Zach?
Was seeing Dusty on Drag Race something that was significant for you, Zach?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's kind of crazy how it all came together because, you know, I so often we hear about people who went through conversion therapy and they see our movie and they go, oh, I didn't realize I went through it too. And
wow.
I had that experience seeing Dusty on Drag Race because I just knew it as like counseling, biblical counseling that I had gone to go see. I'd never really heard the term conversion therapy. And so, you know, here I am, it's 2018, I believe, and I'm in a gay bar with my first serious boyfriend, and seeing the show called RuPaul's Drag Race and see this drag queen on the show talking about their experience. And not only, one of the things that's interesting about that show in particular is that it is often watched in queer spaces with an audience. So almost like, you know, I hear straight people get in bars and watch sports games. I don't know, but like that kind of shared experience. And so it's something unique about that. And so not only seeing Dusty share their story, but seeing people's reactions to that story was something that was very unique for me, and ended up reaching out to Dusty, asking them to do an interview. Mark, their husband, said they shouldn't do it. Dusty initially didn't want to do it. Long story short, they didn't listen. Mark's not one of the producers on the film, and we're glad that Dusty didn't listen to Mark. But yeah, so it's crazy because at that point we were just making a short PSA, and then it turned into it.
Wow!
It really
so
around conversations with survivors.
Another example of the power of Drag Race, that show Drag Race. Like it keeps having these ripple effects, which are amazing. So I also understand, Zach, that you heard that the counselor that you worked with was still in practice doing this. And was that another instigating factor?
Yeah, so that had happened shortly before. The timing of all this happening was really like, I found out my conversion therapist was still practicing. I saw Dusty on Drag Race. It felt, 5 years later, 6 years later, whatever, it feels so long ago, but it may have been a few weeks, it may have been a month or two, I don't really remember, but it was really the culmination of those things happening kind of in sequence where I was becoming more aware of it. Because I think the question my mom asked me was like, do you think what the time that you went to him was helpful? And I was like, no, of course not. Like, how would you even ask me that? And like, I got so angry, I just kind of had to get off the phone.
Wow. And
then I was processing like, well, why am I so angry? Why was what I went through so wrong? And I guess I have never really vocalized what I went through. And this film, I guess, helped me do that in a weird way. So
interesting. Elena, how did you get connected to Zach and decide to be part of the movie?
There's not many of us survivors that can speak about it in a really public way, such as this, or such as speaking to state legislatures when they're thinking about banning the practice. It's such a damaging experience that it's very hard for survivors to be able to speak about it publicly. And Zach and Dusty and I are very lucky, and you could even say blessed, that we have that ability to do so. So I was speaking about it, trying to get a ban to happen in my home state. And I heard about Zach, who was trying to do the same thing in Kentucky. And all of the other people that had spoken with me at these events were parents who had sent their kids, who now regretted it and are sharing about the harm that it caused. And to be able to speak with another survivor, that was a big deal. So as soon as I heard about him, I reached out.
So interesting. In your interaction, in your public face of this, you were dealing with a lot of parents, but not that many survivors. People weren't there and talking about it. So this connection was really meaningful for you. Now, Elena, you were raised Mormon, or you were in the Mormon church. I was raised Mormon, also in Arizona. So when I heard your story, I was like, oh boy. I went to the Mesa Temple, and I got baptized for the dead as a teenager. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but they baptize you over and over again for somebody who has passed on. And we took it very seriously. It was like, I never went through, I quit going to church in college, and I didn't go on a mission. I didn't do any of all those things because I was always the gay kid. I always was. So I related a lot to your story. In terms of the different religions, because I know, Zach, you were a different religion. Is there overlap? Are the Mormons, taking ideas from this one, and are they taking? Do you guys share any in terms of the curriculum or how these practices are done? Is there overlap, or does every church have their own way of doing this?
I think when we think about conversion therapy and we define it as any practice whose goal is to result in heteronormative sexual orientation or gender identity, when you take it from that perspective, and that is the perspective that you take it from figuring out the consequences, the ramifications, right? So that's how we define it when it comes to those stats. So if we take it from that perspective, then that is the thing that all the denominations have in common. This idea that God cannot fully love you until you have fixed yourself, until you are no longer broken. Right. And that's why the stakes are so high.
Right. The mission is the same, even though some of the tools might be different. The movie, Zach, starts out with some shocking statistics. Can you share some of those so the listeners get an idea of the scope of it? I think 698 people, 1,000 people have been through something like conversion therapy. Does that sound right? And the number of... Yeah, go ahead.
So according to the Trevor Project and the Williams Institute, it's kind of combining two studies for the information we cite here, but there are over 698,000 conversion therapy survivors in the U.S. 42% of conversion therapies survivors have attempted or seriously considered suicide in the past year. And that number rises to 57% for trans and non-binary survivors. And nearly 80,000 LGBTQ youth will be subjected to conversion therapy in the next 5 years, or an estimated.
Wow. You know, I'm doing this interview at a time when I'm kind of really mad at religion. As a gay person, you've always got that going on. But lately, like I had a guest on a few weeks ago named Carl Siciliano, who started the Ally for Nay House in New York for homeless queer youth. And almost every story was religion-based. Parents that couldn't do it because of religion. Almost every time. That's who these kids are. And then I went and saw this musical called A Strange Loop. It was touring. It was a big hit in Broadway, won a Tony and a Pulitzer. And it was supposed to be very cutting edge. And structurally, it was very edgy and cool and interesting and of the moment. And then the plot hinged on religious parents who couldn't accept their gay kids. I'm like, again, this like over and over and over. What religion is doing to gay people makes me so mad. So thank you for doing this and getting the word out. But I'm just, if I get a little heated, if my face starts to turn red, I've had it. And watching your movie, I realize one of the things that your movie showed that I'd never really thought about before is if it worked, if conversion therapy worked and people really did become straight, they'd be out of business. So they don't want that. This is it's like the conversion therapy industrial complex. It's like these people's jobs. If it worked, they'd be out of a job. And that was something that I never thought of or put together. So Zach, can you talk a little bit about the piece of it, which is, you know, we act like it's this holy mission, but really what they're doing is trying to keep a roof over their head. This is how they make a living.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize is that it is an industry in a lot of cases.
Yeah,
and
a big industry.
And, you know, I even look at the amount that, you know, my parents spent over the course of 4 years. You know, it was, you know, $200 to $400 a week, depending on the week, for 4 years. So, I mean, you can start to do the math there. That's a lot of money. And different groups and different organizations are different. You know, you asked about religious affiliation earlier. I mean, conversion therapy, especially in its current form, is very insidious and it's underground. And a lot of these underground networks and a lot of churches will say, we don't practice conversion therapy. And that's kind of true, but they fund organizations who do it and they send their kids there.
Yeah, they farm it out.
All themselves of the responsibility and say, well, we don't do that. We don't, but they believe in the mission and they are, you know, outsourcing essentially at this point rather than doing it in a house. And so that kind of makes it almost it doesn't really matter what religion, because like they can send you to someone, you know, if you're a Mormon or you're, you know, I came from a non-denominational mega church. So, you know, on the surface of a mega church, they're going to seem to be very accepting and come chill in our coffee shop and, you know, watch the sermon from out here on TVs and, you know, all that kind of stuff that makes it feel very warm and accepting. But in reality, if you're a kid growing up in that church that is queer, like you are going to be, there's a system in place to how to handle that.
And part of what they want to do is keep you going. Like you can't be progressing too much or you'd quit, or, you know, like they want to keep you going. That's the mission, not any kind of big change. Like that's something that really struck me. And the other thing that you talk about in the documentary is there have been new laws on the books against conversion therapy, but your movie makes the point that they have not shut down one organization. They've just changed or mutated. Is that right? These laws have really done not a lot of damage on the ground?
I mean, that's certainly a hotly contested point, and there are different people that would argue with that at certain levels. You know, there have been organizations that have certainly been shut down, but they tend to always find their way back. So it's like they get shut down here and this group, and a lot of times when they're shut down and if they don't come back, it's because those people gave up and are now out living as an out and, you know, gay or queer person themselves. And so otherwise they tend to just kind of regroup, reband, and come back under a new website, new logo, new hipper terminology. And so, you know, you'll see terms like reintegrative therapy. Now they're the reintegrative protocol is kind of a new one that's out of California. And, these are states that have technically banned the practice for minors, but it's still legal in every state for adults, which, Elena and Dustin's stories were both stories in the film, and they both went to it as adults.
Right.
And it is still legal if you are a religious practitioner, because, they're basically circumventing, freedom of religion and First Amendment rights, that like we should have the ability to do this. And so if you are, in some states, it's not legal to charge money for it. But in other states, if you're a religious practitioner, you can charge money and you can still do it. So,
yeah, it's pretty insidious. As an outsider, this is trafficking a little in stereotypes, but I think it's worth bringing up. Sometimes you'll see one of these people talking on television, and you're like, "Oh, that guy's gay. That guy's so gay." Like, and I'm sure that you experienced while you're in it, like there was one guy that's in your movie that's just in a flyer, and I'm like, oh, gay face. And I don't or also they're talking and they're saying these things, and you're like, oh man, I don't know, maybe it's my age or something, but they're trying so hard to fight it, and sometimes it's just so much a part of who we are. Like, I had a friend that did a blog project that ended up being a book called Born This Way, and they were pictures of queer people as kids, where you could just tell it was the way they were standing. And there was something poignant about it, and it was sweet, and it's beautiful, and it's fine. But it's like just seeing people it's so painful to see them fighting against their nature when it's right there, right? I don't know if you have any thoughts about this, but it's something that struck me over and over as I was watching your film, are these people that are coming out so hard against it. It just feels like they're gay. Come on. I don't know. Thoughts? Is this, am I missing the point here, or is this an offensive line of questioning? But it's something that I thought of over and over again. And I think if this is their life day after day after day, it must be very hard to fight against that and, try to portray another thing.
I think, that's one thing that Dustin talks about in the movie, of like, why were they doing this to a kid? And he's like, because they knew that I was gay, and they implicitly knew that. And so to be able to recognize that in someone
before you knew it, before you understood anything about it, really.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And it's like, I go back and look at, we went through so much of my home video footage of making this documentary, and there's some footage that's not included in the film where I think my 5th grade birthday party was a Wizard of Oz themed birthday party, like it's like Dorothy and the Scarecrow and, all the, and it's like, gay,
right.
So, and when you see these people, and I think that's one of the things that makes our film unique, is that you mentioned earlier that this film felt different. And
I think felt different. I've seen other things about this topic, but yours felt different.
And I think one of those differences is that you're often hearing from the people who did it. So you're hearing from, Alan Chambers, or you're hearing from some of these people who led these organizations, and you're hearing them kind of on their apology tour of how they kind of knew it was fucked up the whole time.
Yeah.
And that they knew what they were, but they were trying to convince themselves that it wasn't.
Right.
And you're hearing from them, and I guess that is a sensational story in certain ways, but you're not watching those films, some of them were difficult to watch, like really challenging to watch, because I went to their conferences. A lot of these people that, McCrae and Allen and other leaders, whose names I'm blanking on, Joe Dallas, like I heard and heard them speak, and Joe Dallas is someone who's still out there. He has not changed in his messaging really at all. And that's one of the things that we show in the film. But other people like Michael Chambers and others, or Alan Chambers and others.
My note next to him is gay face. And he's the flyer that I wrote, gay face.
And, it's like the truth comes out eventually, but, it's not my position to judge anyone, but to have this sort of self-hatred and then monetize that and weaponize it against other queer kids is something that is, and adults, is something that is very, very harmful. And I think hearing from people that went through it is, we're only 3 stories. Like, I hope that more people do watch this and are encouraged to tell their stories, whether they went through conversion therapy or if something else that they went through caused them to be forced into be someone that they weren't. We all should have the right to personal autonomy. And I hope I think that's one of the messages that the film conveys.
Right. You talking about your Wizard of Oz birthday party, it reminded me, like, I had small versions of them trying to butch me up. I remember, like, I was a Cub Scout or a Boy Scout, and I wasn't that into it, but there was one camp thing where we went away and I got the most merit badges. And it was probably all the arts and crafts stuff, the easier ones. And they gave me an award in sacrament meeting for getting the most merit badges. And even then I thought, oh, they're trying to reward me for doing the boy thing. They're trying, like, it was, I could feel that it wasn't, like, they probably cooked up this award. You know, I could feel like that thing of, like, you're not okay the way you are. We want you to be this other way. And, you know, it's taken to an extreme in this conversion therapy. But even those subtle things where you're like, it's not okay. It's rough. Elena, I would love to talk to you about somebody who I admire very much, David Archuleta, the singer who was raised Mormon. And he came out, I don't know, a couple of years ago. He was on American Idol, but it sounded like he, kind of like you, he tried and tried and tried and tried to not be gay. And finally it was like, I can't do this anymore. Have you followed his story closely, or do you have any connection with him at all?
Not a strong connection, but I was definitely one of those Mormons that followed him on when he was on American Idol. And I just thought, look at this really great Mormon boy, right? And I was so proud, like so many other Mormons, when he chose to serve a mission and he was choosing the right, you know, and it was just
CTR. I used to have the CTR ring, choose the right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, and then to see him come home and to watch BYU specifically kind of parade him around as if you're going to be gay, this is the gay Mormon you should be, like celibate and single, and we'll put you up on a stage and celebrate you as long as you can adhere to that. And it was probably 6 months after the last one of those performances that he had to give that he just really publicly, clearly came out and said, I've tried everything and I'm done.
And that
was powerful to hear. Really powerful.
And it's been fun to watch his performances later when you see him sort of like his movement style, his freedom, he's exploring himself. It's exciting. And yeah, I admire him. And Elena, speaking about your life, you were married with 4 kids. Like you blew up your entire world. And I think that takes so much courage. And I love the way you spoke about it. And what I'm curious about is when that happened, how bad was the fallout? Like, was it, because I could imagine, I mean, I know how close-knit Mormon communities are and how it's probably everyone you socialize with. It's a huge thing to step away from. And I'm curious what the time was like after you made that decision. Quiet.
It was really quiet.
It was really quiet.
Yeah. There weren't a lot of people reaching out.
Right.
It wasn't just like losing my network. It was, I had built my kids' entire social lives around our ward. Yeah. And till all of a sudden they weren't invited over for play dates. And,
so you're realizing I'm sure the worry was, I don't know how this is going to affect my family, but to see it affect them that way in this day-to-day sort of, they're being ostracized too in a way.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry you went through that. I just know that world. I know there's wonderful things about it. You know, if you're in that community and you're going through something, they will show up with a casserole.
Yes.
They are there for each other. And that's part of what I think is painful about religion not making room for queer people, because there are things about it that can really enrich your life. And I think we get so much abuse that we're like, screw it all. Like I'm not, that's not for me. How are things now with your social world and your family and your kids, and how is life for you now in those areas?
You know, it's wildly wonderful and in a way that I would never have expected. For example, if you had told me 5 years ago that my oldest 2 boys would be going to school at Brigham Young University and I would be okay with it.
Wow.
I would have told you you're smoking crack.
Wow.
But now where we are is the fact is that the boys' dad said that they will pay for school if they go to BYU. What kid in their right mind with the cost of tuition these days would say no to that?
Right.
No kid, right? So the fact is my kids are getting essentially a free bachelor's degree.
Right.
And they are experiencing the nuance of belief that happens on that campus. They are seeing the extremes as well as the Jack Mormons, right? The people who dial it in. And they're really starting to figure it out on their own, what their brand of Mormonism is, what their faith of Mormonism is. And that's really cool to see, because back in the day, it really felt like I had two options: either support them in their church activity and feel the pain of that, or break down their testimony,
right,
and feel the pain of
and
that.
say you got to leave too. Like you,
right?
yeah.
Like neither of those options felt good. So the fact is we're living a reality that I could have never expected, and it's better than anything I could have dreamed. That's
fantastic. That's remarkable. I had friends that went to BYU, and it's a whole thing.
It is a whole thing.
Right. It is a whole thing.
I will say the queer kids on that campus have organized.
Really? How do they do it?
Hundreds and hundreds of queer kids on that campus, and they are all organized into all their own little subgroups and committees. And when it's time for Pride Day or the Pride Parade, 5,000 people will come out. Like, that campus is organized to the nth degree, even though those kids will be kicked out if they are found to be engaging in same-sex behavior.
Right. Yeah. They can't date or kiss or have sex or anything like that, but they can have parades and stuff, and they do.
And they do.
I had no idea. I didn't think you could be out and proud that way. I thought it was like different. That's amazing.
These kids are figuring it out, just like how my kids are figuring it out, and I'm figuring it out. And you're like, we're figuring it out, and it's kind of really cool to see.
Wow, that's so interesting. Another thing I want to talk to about the movie, you do this thing with miniatures, like these houses and folding chairs and very detailed, very kind of cinematic. I thought it was an inspired choice, and it was really well done. So, Zach, talk to me about that idea and how you came to it.
Yeah, so it started out, honestly, as COVID hit and we couldn't go film B-roll with everyone. And we wanted to film Elena, and Elena was in Arizona. We wanted to film Kelsey. Kelsey was in Nebraska. You know, Wayne was in Philadelphia. Dusty was in New York.
Kelsey and Wayne are some of your experts that speak, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So we couldn't get everyone to one place anymore. And so we ended up figuring out, this was summer of 2020, so very early on in the pandemic. But Elena put on her hazmat suit and got on a plane to Louisville. And we filmed her in my backyard, which is why her interview looks a little different visually than some of the other ones that were in a studio. But then we couldn't go and film B-roll of all these people. So we decided... We came up with the idea of miniatures. Brad Wagster is the editor and one of the producers on the film, and he and I were brainstorming one day. He was like, I wish we could have like rooms that incorporated these, but we can't like build huge sets. And I was like, what if they were miniature? Because there's this idea of like childhood innocence that you're playing with and you're manipulating. And when you look at them through a specific lens and a specific point of view, it looks real. And if the details are right, and you say the right things and you spin it the right way, it feels like your reality.
Right.
But then when you pull back and you start considering other angles, it all starts to fall apart.
Oh, that's just plastic. That's plastic, and it's not sturdy.
Yeah. And so, we were literally building like little miniature theater flats and, little things to put out the windows to light and to have everything look realistic. But then again, when you step back, so as you watch the movie in the beginning, you're kind of seeing the scene set. And then everything feels real for a while until people start, and then you start to see the edges of the sets. You start to see kind of, some lights here and there. And then at the end, you're seeing people reclaim their stories. And we were able to bring everyone back in almost a year later and film, Elena and Dustin and myself, like with the miniatures, interacting with them. And that was a whole different experience. I don't know, Elena, you can probably talk more about that experience for you. You hadn't seen them before. I had been around them a lot.
Well, it was very effective. Elena, talk to me about how you related to the miniatures when you saw them after telling your story.
Well, so Zach had told me excitedly about the plan over the phone. And I was like, okay, a dollhouse, great. Like, I didn't see the vision.
One of my friends called me and literally said, so you're playing with dollhouses now? And I was like,
right. So I just was like, I trust you, right? I implicitly trusted his eye. So that was my response then. And then to be able to get there, I mean, I will not forget. I touched down in Louisville. The humidity overtakes me. My hair grows by about 10 inches.
Right.
And I get to their studios in downtown Louisville, and I walk into this incredible studio, and there's this miniature set of my room where I went through this experience. There's the leather chair. There's the couch. There's the, like, that was wild.
The counseling office, you mean, not your bedroom.
Yeah. And then to realize, like, oh, this is teeny tiny. Like, this is, I get to have power over this.
I could kick
smash
this over
this right now if I wanted to.
Yeah.
You know, to realize, like, I am out of this situation. I got myself out of it. And now I can look back on it, and I have all the power and control now. Like, talk about healing.
Yeah.
Doing this movie was healing for me. So cool.
I'm glad to hear that. You know, it's such an inspired choice, the miniatures. And I think it works in ways that you didn't even expect. But, like, there's shots of, like, these little miniature folding chairs. And you're talking about Dusty went through an exorcism, like this crazy exorcism, but it was like in a conference room, kind of like it wasn't in some cave or anything. It was like there's folding chairs, and there was a person that was like the exorcist person. I wrote down the name, but I'm trying to find it. They had a funny title or a unique title. The Prayer Warrior. The Prayer Warrior was this place, and then the parents were over here, and you used the set to sort of describe it, and it was just so sort of sinister and also pedestrian at the same time, because just folding chairs that you would get at the multi-purpose room, that's a Mormon term, but it's down the road, it's down the hall from the Relief Society room anyway. But yeah, like, just the way you used them was super inspired, and it also looked like a lot of care and work went into them. It felt like they took a while to make. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, so I worked with a production designer. His name's JP Parrish. He's out of Nashville. And we'd worked on a couple movies together. And we worked on a music video once where he built this like 6 feet long spaceship out of transistor radio parts for this music video. And it was super cool. So I was like, JP, I had talked to him, and he didn't, there weren't a lot of movie shooting at that time. And so I was like, I know you're looking for work. Is this something that you think you could do? And he said, absolutely. And there were some moments that he took the floors in it are popsicle sticks that were cut and sanded down. And there's, there's just so many little details that were put into each experience where we went and talked to each person. Because obviously the rooms are different. They're not exact replicas, but we asked for details, and all those details are in there and more. So it's really cool. And even like the books on the bookshelves are different conversion therapy books, and, different things like that. So it's really interesting how it's all put together. But then, the outlets on the wall sockets are Legos, to kind of, again, like be a nod to this isn't real. This is fake. If you look for some of these details, you'll see that this isn't real.
Right.
So
it conveys it conveys that message sort of under the surface. Did you keep the stuff? Do you have the models?
We have kept them I'm glad we kept them, because we've used them for a lot of marketing purposes and
nice.
Yeah, we do. They're mostly in storage now, but yes, we do still have them.
Right. Did you guys bond with other people that were in those groups? Do you have friends from that time, or is it very individual when you're in those, when you're going through that? Is it a very individual thing, or is there, I don't know, group classes or group therapy type situations, or is it just you?
I think everyone's experience is different. I think some people do go through it as more as a group. I've definitely met people that have had that experience, and they have a different perspective, because for some of them, they were able to maintain relationships, and they were able to get away from the conversion therapy because they had each other.
Right.
For other people, they kind of stayed in it because they had someone they had really connected with. And then I think are even more people who have lost that person they had a connection with while they were going through it. And they are constantly wondering if that person made it.
Yeah.
Because we know how many do not. But I think that it is a really individual experience. Like everyone has a different experience. Mine was very individual. I would see people coming out as I was going in or vice versa, but it was never like a group experience.
Right. You were on your own. What about for you, Zach? Were there other people?
Sort of. I was always being pressured to go to like the camp or go to group sessions, and I always avoided it because I felt like it would be more traumatic than what I was already going through. And my reasoning behind it was always to my parents, like, do you really want me to meet other gay people? But that kept me from going.
It worked.
And yeah. So I don't know whether that kept me safe or not, but I did find out, and actually it's through the experience that Elena mentions of passing someone, where I passed someone in my Boy Scout troop going in as I was coming out. And we like talked about it once, and then now that person is out and gay, but like I've tried to talk to them a few times and they just like don't want to talk about that experience. And I know other people who saw the guy that I went and saw. And initially when I started making this, my story was not going to be one of the stories in the film. And I didn't want it to be, because I know that other people had it worse than I did. You know, I know people that even the guy I went to go see treated worse than he did me. But those aren't my stories to tell, and those people didn't want to tell their story. And so all I can do is speak my truth and tell my story.
Right.
So that's what I did.
And part of your story, there's a detail of it that I found very memorable, the rubber band. You wore a rubber band. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, I wore a rubber band for a long time to kind of use as a reminder and as a symbol. And it, you know, essentially taught me self-harm. And it is something that I really had to weed out of my psyche and out of my, luckily it's something that I have not, I felt the urge, but I have not done in a long time. But that's something that, again, it felt very unnatural to me at first. And, you know, it's Taylor, one of the other producers in the film, and I have known each other since we were kids. And he remembers, you know, he talks about in the beginning of the movie, he remembers me having the rubber band, but he never really knew what it was or what it was about.
Right.
I think a lot of people were that way. And, you know, it kind of graduated to, you know, just like, you know, literally banging my head against the wall, or like, you know, trying to find other ways to inflict physical pain on myself, because I was having those thoughts that were, you know, going to send me to hell, essentially.
Right.
And so, when you're fighting something that's just who you are, it's an horrible, you know, because you just pass some guy on the street and think they're attractive, you know, meanwhile you
would snap
you're on a college campus and your friends are talking about the hot girl that passes, and they're all, you know, oohing and on and catcalling her, and that's fine. But then all of a sudden you're over here like literally harming yourself, and because you had a similar thought. So, yeah.
And there's another thing you say in the movie, that you used to be very outgoing and fun and creative and colorful, and then at around 15 you got really introverted, and you sort of say people don't just do that. It was a result of this, and I think there's this pain of what could have been, all this unnecessary hurt. It was so unnecessary, and I think when the parents probably put it together and everyone puts it together, I just think, oh my gosh. It's so sad when you think about it. And I think there's a weight to it, which might be why some people don't want to talk about it. It's just like, it's very sad to reckon with, I would think, for people on all sides of it.
Yeah. And I think coming forward and sharing your story is difficult. I think that's why at the beginning I talked about Dustin not wanting to do it and Mark not wanting Dustin to do it. You know, that was Mark trying to protect Dustin,
right? Because
Dustin had been hurt so many times by coming forward with their story and being exploited. And, you know, time and time again, of someone wanting to know the gritty details and this and that, and, you know, well, what happened and what did they do? And, you know, they're like looking for the salacious story and the salacious headline. And no one really wants to be a part of that or have their story used in that way. And so I understand why I approached a lot of people about telling their story as part of this documentary, and I understand why a lot of them said no.
Right.
And people have lots of different reasons. And, if anyone had any hesitation about being involved in the film, I would tell them you shouldn't be involved in this because you need to be sure. And I don't want to exploit your story. And that's why the first people to see the film were like Elena saw the film, Dustin saw the film, and outside of the staff of Chronicle Cinema, my production company, no one had seen the edit because I didn't want anyone to feel like that their story was being hijacked or that they were being made to say something that they weren't intending to say. And so I think that's important. And again, I think one of the things that has made this film unique, and now I am very connected to and friends with, I was just drove to Cincinnati last weekend to go see Dusty perform in Rocky Horror Picture Show in, Cincinnati, and seeing them just be a star there and get all these amazing reviews. And then I see Elena out on the road, speaking at these, huge conferences and telling their story. And what a joy that I get to be those people's friends and cheer them on now. And they get to cheer me on is really special.
That's beautiful. I find that so moving because as a kid, I was a creative kid. I loved music and dance. And for Mormons, it's kind of good because they do road shows. There's opportunities. There's dances. It's not one of those churches that are like dancing's bad. So they love all of that to a point. But if you were going to pursue it professionally or, that's a little edgy, it's interesting. I felt like it was a fine place for creativity to a point. So it's kind of cool that you would mention that and you're seeing Dusty in these shows and stuff. Because I think for me, it was always tied together, the creativity and the gayness, before I could even put a word to it. Elena, was it a yes right away to be in this movie, or what went into your consideration? Why did you decide to do it?
It was a yes right away. And I don't know that I was conscious of it at the time, but I certainly am now. Using my voice helps me to heal. And that is my number one priority and has been since the day that I stopped going to conversion therapy. I need to heal and I need to stay. I want to stay and be here for my kids. So every time I open my mouth and I speak my truth, I feel more here. So that was an easy yes for me, for sure.
I love hearing that. And you talk about in the documentary about, you're living the perfect Mormon life, family, and one day you realize, I'm not happy. And the courage it must take to explore that and to try to change it. I think a lot of people would relate to that, whether they're gay or not, but they just end up in a life where they're not happy. And the courage to make a change. What inspired you to go, okay, I'm going to do something about this? Why I can't just write it out. I can't do it anymore. What was the tipping point for you?
I love your rose-colored perspective on this because I think that that's much more beautiful than what went down. I was desperate to not be thinking of her every night.
Right.
I needed to stay. Yeah. Right. So it was, okay, I need to fix this because I need this marriage so that I can be in heaven and I can be with my kids for eternity. Right.
And you had met somebody in your life that you had started to have really strong feelings for that were bigger than all the others.
Yes. And that becomes undeniable.
So you were trying to run away from that and make your current life work. Okay. I got the timeline right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So then it was okay, well, the way to be fixed is to go to this one guy in town. Right. Right.
I got a guy. He's the best.
I got a guy.
He's the best.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And he makes all his money from the bishops cutting him tithing checks.
Oh.
So,
Yeah. I'm so infuriated with all of this. Anyway, keep going.
So, and then it became, eventually that becomes a life or death situation. And then once it's at that point, it's not courage anymore, right? At that point, it's, I'm just going to do what I need to do to stay alive.
Yeah,
and if
it's
that
survival.
means being out to the entire world, I'll be out to the entire world because I've already looked at death.
I faced it.
Nothing can be worse than that.
Wow.
And if I'm alive, we're doing good.
Who was the first person you told? What was your first step toward opening that door?
I told my sister.
Wow, and
I remember her saying, love is so precious and so rare. Don't throw that away. And it was the exact thing I needed to hear,
right.
Of course.
The love that you had found with this new person. Mm-hmm. It is rare, right?
Yeah, it is.
I mean, I've been out for a long time. I've been part of the gay community. I've been doing this podcast. I've been going to all of these things. And every once in a while you step away and you get a perspective on what we're all dealing with and what we're all talking about. And in some ways it's very heartening. And in other ways I'm just infuriated. Like people talk about the coming out process. I think the best people can hope for is either a neutral or it's going to be either neutral or negative. There's no positive. Why not? Why doesn't somebody say, oh, that's great. There's wonderful things about being gay. Yay. Like it feels like we can't even, that's not even on the menu. And I've had it. Anyway, I'm going off on a tirade. But that's why your film, things like this are so important, because people are being hurt day after day after day after day, and unnecessarily, in my opinion. Any thoughts on my soapbox moment?
Well, I will say, I think our future trend is changing. Like the fact is we had an entire article in Variety magazine of Billie Eilish saying, all right, people, if you couldn't look at me and see that I was queer, you needed me to have some big coming out moment so that you could treat me the right way. Yeah. Here's your big coming out moment, right? Like, I think that's where Gen Z is going. They're not going to come out. If you can't treat them with respect, regardless of whether they've come out or not, they could give a rip. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
Like, I think we're going in that direction. I think in 3 generations, we're not going to have a coming out experience anymore, which is kind of wild.
I love that you said they could give a rip. You remind me of everybody I grew up with in such a wonderful way. Mormons have their own swear words. Zach, I don't know if you know this. Flip is the F word, right?
My boys are saying fetch. And now I've had to tell them, not in my house. You will not use that word in my house.
They're trying to make fetch happen.
They really are.
Yeah. All of these like little charming Mormonisms that this is all bringing up for me. Another quote that I wrote down that somebody says, and you'll remember, I don't remember who said it, but when you feel like you can't be the way you are, somebody said, I'm secretly the most person in the room. Like in every room you're in, you secretly believe you're the worst person in the room. What a thing to carry around for a young person, or for any person, really. Do you remember who says that in the documentary?
It was me.
It was you. That was me. That was me. I'll take it. Yeah. That was one of mine. Yeah.
It's true. I think I did say that. No, it's interesting because growing up in I was the person who everyone's parents, like all my friends would get into trouble and make, why can't you be like Zach?
Oh,
you know?
Yes, you were the good boy. The gay boys are the good boys.
Because I didn't want to do anything wrong, because I didn't want anyone to find out my secret.
Right.
And then when it was apparent and people did start to find out, no one said that anymore. Everyone was like, oh, thank God. I'm not like,
right.
Like them. And, a lot of people will say like, oh, your parents forced you to go through this. And I was in a very environment where I didn't really have any other options to go, but I certainly wasn't being forced. Like, I wanted to go because I wanted to be a part of the only community I knew.
Right.
Wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be loved. And I didn't have any queer role models in my life. I didn't grow up with TV in my house, so I didn't even have, role models on TV to really see until I was in high school. So, my view was so warped, and I see that now, but very different experience.
What is it like for both of you to deal with parents? Because I feel like they must see this movie, and if they take the message to heart, they must feel horrible. And they must, there's a lot of pain there too. They're not the bad guys, right? How do you interact with parents?
I think for me, it comes from a place of, I know I was a college-educated, upper-middle-class white woman who got tricked into this. You know what I mean? Like, I got tricked into it because I had put blinders on. Like, I didn't Google this guy. I didn't Google, like, what college do you go to be really good at conversion therapy, right? Like, because I was desperate. I needed it to work. And I know that if it had been one of my kids that I had felt that kind of desperation for, I would have been even more tunnel visioned. So I get that. I really do. And I also get the parents that respond to me saying we need to have a ban. And their response is, I don't want the government telling me how I can help my kid and how I can't help my kid. Like, I should be able to decide that. And I totally get that as well.
Right.
And the response to that, and I love to be able to put this into interviews because it gives other people the ability to use this response as well, is in our society, if parents choose to not protect their children, we have a system in place to do it for them. It's why we have child seatbelt laws. It's why we have child pornography laws, right?
Right.
Like, we as a society will step in and protect your child from harm if you're not doing that. And that's what conversion therapy is. We have the science to know how harmful it is. And if you're still choosing, then we need to have a law to prevent that. So I think for me, my perspective is in working with parents, I get how you can be tricked into it. And I also get how now that you have more information, you can make a different choice.
I hope that when parents see this film, and even like aunts and uncles see this film, that they will see the warning signs more. Well, what do you mean Jimmy's going off to camp? What is that? What do you mean he's going away for 3 weeks? Why, like, if those warning signs can be seen, or, that change can start to happen. And I think that I hope that blinders do come off for people, because, I didn't come out until I was 26. I stopped going to conversion therapy when I was 18, and I was very committed to being, the celibate Christian kid until from 18 to 24, even though I knew that it, quote unquote, hadn't worked.
Right.
But yeah, it's crazy how warped my perspective was at the time. I remember one time I even told my therapist that I literally just think I noticed this woman's boobs at the mall.
Right.
And I told him that, and he was like, that's great. Like, he was running to throw a party,
right.
And I was like, I thought about it later, and I was like, I think I literally just noticed that she had boobs. Like, right. I was not having a lustful thought, but I was trying to come up with anything or grasp at any straws to be like, this is somehow working. And I knew that it wasn't. And again, I thought that rather than think that I'm okay, it made me think I'm even more defective, because it's not working for me. So rather than thinking this is wrong, I was thinking I'm even more wrong. Like, I can't let them know that this isn't working.
Right.
And there would be a part of me to be like, well, maybe this is messed up and maybe this is wrong. And I became very convinced that the one guy I was seeing was wrong because of the things that he would say and do. But I still just thought oh, he's the bad apple. There's
right.
probably other people who do this better.
Right. I've got to try harder. I'm the problem. I'm the problem. I'm the problem. I'm the problem. And you finally... 24 that I realized that and wanted to come out. But it wasn't until I was 26 where I was able to be in a position to feel like I safely could come out. Yeah.
And so that's when I came out. There's
one character in your movie. I call him a character because he's such a character and not my favorite. McCrae Game. He was an ex-gay leader, but he still loves the spotlight. It's the weirdest. He's such a piece of work. And we don't need to give him much airtime, but I did want to acknowledge that I don't know.
Strangest 3.5 hour interview I've ever done. He would not stop talking. Just kept going. We went to go film B-roll with him, and we were he started saying even more things, and we were we're just filming B-roll, and the interview's over. And he's like, well, I'm still mic'd,
Right. I still got a mic on. Where's that camera? Even in admitting the error of his ways, he was still hey, you want to see me? I got a tap dance I could do. It just felt a little like that kind of going on. Before I let you go, tell people how they can see your movie.
Yeah, so obviously we hope everyone can see it. It is available now on any video-on-demand platform. Essentially, it's on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, YouTube TV, Microsoft Store, Vimeo, all the big video-on-demand platforms. You can also just go follow us on social media at Conversion Movie. There's a link tree there with all the links. Our soundtrack streaming on Spotify. Blake Allen wrote it beautiful. And talking about the Mormon tradition as well, Blake Allen, the composer, comes from a Mormon background.
Of course he does. I bet he did great road shows. I bet he was that guy. I was kind of that guy. And they love you until they realize, it goes with the gay thing. But that's amazing. That's cool that he did the soundtrack.
I think that's one of the things that's beautiful about this film too, is that everyone that's on the film and involved in the film relates to it in their own unique way with their own story, whether they went through conversion therapy or not. And so I think that's one of the things that's really special. So yeah, please, you can buy it on all major video on demand platforms. There'll be other ways to watch it down the road, but for now, that's the best way to find us, and conversionmovie.com as well.
There you go. Now, Joy, you have a foundation, right?
I did. Yep. I was leading a nonprofit for about 4 years.
Oh, very cool.
Recently. Yeah, it was fabulous.
All right. I love it. You went from like going through this experience to really speaking out. The journey of that seemed quick and inspiring. So yay for you.
Elena went from being, the first conversation she had with me, she was calling in her closet. And now Elena goes and speaks to HR people and companies and is just such a badass and travels all over and really helps companies and people who maybe want to do the right thing but don't know how to do the right thing. And Elena really does great at that, and is one of just knows how to get in there and work her magic. So yeah,
I love it. You remind me of all the cool women I grew up with in the Mormon church. Can people learn about what you do? Do you have something that you want to plug? How can they do that?
My website is latitudeleaders.com. I also play on LinkedIn quite a bit. I'm pretty much like I'm redoing the system from the inside, basically.
Love it.
I get corporate to pay me to come into corporate to teach employees how to get rid of their internalized homophobia, which they happen to also get rid of that when they go home at night and have conversations with their kids. So that's how I'm trying to create more affirming parents, is by going into their job and doing it that way.
I love that. That's really cool.
You.
Very interesting. I have two more questions. First one, what have the reactions been like to the documentary? Can you think of any that really surprised you or moved you? I
mean, everyone seems to have a very strong, powerful response. It's been interesting. We did do screenings in LA and New York and Chicago and Louisville, Portland. And it's interesting how different cities have different responses to it. In Kentucky, it's very, very quiet because everyone's like, who's over my shoulder watching me watch this? Like, what is my, it feels very real. In New York, it was much more of like, oh my God, this happens. Like what the, is going on, and much more of a surprise response. But everyone, I think, has a very emotional response to the film, and it's very individualized. But I think, again, we try to, at the end of our movie, make it hopeful and that we are reclaiming our stories. So I hope people walk away with that. But what about you, Elena?
One thing that I loved, and I think you'll like this, Dennis, with your recent rants that you've been on.
Thank you.
The New York City audience was a lot quicker to laugh. And there are some moments in the film. For example, in the beginning, there's a part where Kelsey, one of the experts, says, Christians have been obsessed with sex for a long time. And the New York City audience just died laughing.
Yeah.
And that was fabulous to be a part of. To sit in the audience and to feel that community joy in that moment was awesome.
I love that. All right, here's my final question. You say this in the documentary, that conversion therapy didn't change your sexual orientation. What did it change?
It took away my joy, really, and it filled me with a lot of shame. And I think I'm still on a journey of learning how to get some of that back, and I think I've been really fighting a lot of that shame throughout so many areas of my life. And I feel like now with my community and with my chosen family, I'm able to start doing that. And this film has really allowed me to do that, and has given me some of that joy back. And, that's what I hope to do for myself. And I hope that this is a launch pad for others to do the same thing for themselves, because it's all a journey we have to figure out on our own.
I think it will. I think your movie is powerful in that way. Elena, any thoughts about that question?
Yes.
Yes, I have thoughts.
Let me tell you my thoughts.
Yes.
I'm going to give you an answer that I haven't given anyone else, and it's going to be very real, and I hope that's okay.
Yes, we love that.
Conversion therapy took away my ability to figure out who I am in a really happy way. There isn't a way to start your first same-sex relationship and not have panic attacks while you're making out, and not have that be pretty tumultuous, to not have that affect your relationship, your sense of self, your future. Like, that's what conversion therapy did to me, is it caused this constant questioning of validity for myself as a human for the first several years. And I'm definitely still working on that.
Are you in the relationship with the person that I'm so happy it worked out. I loved it. Because when you talked about there, when you're first meeting somebody and you've got that going on, it's, you want to make a good impression with somebody new. So
right?
It says a lot that went the distance. So I'm so happy to hear that.
Thank you. What it also took away was an ability to waste time. There's no more time to waste anymore. I have today. That's all that I know that I have. And so I get the ability to take full advantage of today, to use my voice to the fullest extent, and to make the most positive impact I possibly can, because I literally don't know that tomorrow is coming.
Wow, that's beautiful.
So I would say those are big things.
Those are big things. The first one sounded rough, like really rough. But the second one, I think there's having an urgency about life, I think is beautiful and important. And I think we earn that. I don't think we just have it.
One of the things, too, Into Magazine wrote an article, and one of the things that they said about the film was that it's more than a film, it's a catalyst for change. And so I can't think of a better way to put it myself, and I hope that we're able to do that.
Well, congratulations to both of you. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. I hope everybody checks it out. Even if you've seen other things on this subject, there's something about this one that felt very fresh and personal and infuriated me. So thank you. Congratulations. I've had it. Thanks for doing the podcast.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks again to Zach Miners and Elena Joy. Check out their very excellent documentary, Conversion. It just came to VOD, and you can learn about that at conversionmovie.com. All right, so this happened. I am recording this a few days after July 4th weekend, and I had the craziest weekend, so I'm going to break it down. But they're all fun things I want to share with you guys. So I'm going to just go day by day. Okay, so Wednesday, before the 4th of July, my favorite revival house, Vidiot's, was showing a movie called Magic Mike XXL. Perhaps you've heard of it. It's one of my favorite movies in the last 10 years. I saw it the first time, and I loved it, but I just thought there was this wonderful worldview going on under the surface of the fun that I was really obsessed with. It was kind of this all-inclusive, everyone's cool with everyone kind of vibe. So I just remember the way it made me feel watching it the first time, and I thought, I'll go see it again. My friend Danny's also a big fan, so we went to Vidiot's to see it. We thought night before a holiday, it might be a third full. Like, we thought we'd just have kind of a mellow time. Turns out, no. This thing is becoming a cult movie, you guys. The hosts of Vidiot's, there were two people that kind of introed the movie that are big fans. They gave out dollars to throw, fake dollars to shake and throw in the air when you were having a good time or you were pleased with one of the performers on the screen. It was nearly packed, I think. You might have been able to get a ticket. I don't know. But it was like Rocky Horror kind of enthusiasm, RRR kind of enthusiasm. People were screaming and yelling and clapping, mostly women. And we sat down next to a woman that was on her own, and, we were talking to her about the movie before it started, and she said none of her friends wanted to come. And we're like, well, we'll be your friend. We can all hang out together. So her name was Hannah, and I asked her, she'd seen the movie 20 times. And I said, what do you love about this movie? She goes, it's a great example of non-toxic masculinity. And I thought that was really deep. And so if you watch the movie, there are no antagonists. There's barely any stakes. There's not even a contest at the end. They just want to put on a show with their friends. And I love any story about friendship. And the biggest tension in the movie comes because Channing Tatum's character, Magic Mike, some of the guys felt that he'd kind of blown him off when he moved on from the group. That's it. Nobody ever makes fun of anybody else in this movie. Everyone is safe. There's an extended scene in this one strip club with Michael Strahan doing a strip routine with a curvier woman, and that's beautiful. And everyone's welcome. There's a scene early on in a drag bar, and as a gay person, you're like, oh no, are they gonna roll their eyes? Is there gonna be a little thing that makes me feel bad? No, everyone's cool with everyone, and I would love to live in a world like Magic Mike XXL, and I'm so happy that it's becoming a cult movie. People are losing their minds, and if it ever shows there again, when it does, maybe it'll be a July 4th tradition. I am taking everyone I know who enjoys having a good time. So that was Wednesday night. We haven't even gotten into the holidays yet. Okay, so Thursday, there was a Xanadu screening at the Academy Museum. Now, I've talked before on this podcast about Xanadu. We did a whole episode with Dave White and Alonzo Duralde from Linoleum Knife, and they let me play it on my podcast feed. And my friend Rustin happened to listen to that, and he's also a fan, and he was inspired to bring all these Xanadu fans together. We had this luncheon. I talked about it on the podcast. We all bonded over this movie from a million years ago. So we all got jackets made for the Xanadu screening because we all love the jacket that Michael Beck's character is wearing at the end when he works at Xanadu. It's like a maroon-covered, colored jacket, and it has embroidery. Well, after our luncheon, Rustin did a little investigating and figured out that he could make these jackets with embroidery and the right colors and the whole thing if we wanted them. So we all, Venmo'd him our money, and our jackets came in, and they're beautiful. So 4th of July, I don't know, 12 of us? I don't know how many people have the jackets. We show up at this screening. We have these jackets. The other fans that are there are so jealous. You could feel it. And we took pictures. I'm like, what is happening? We all have our jackets, but it was deliriously fun. The movie gets better and worse every time I see it. And it was amazing. So that's the 4th of July. What happens Friday? So Friday, that's the 5th. I go with my friend Benji, my good dance teacher friend, and we go to see a little artist known as Paula Abdul, who is opening for the New Kids on the Block. Paula Abdul was on my dream board. I feel like if she can still dance at 62 and do those moves, then she is indeed forever our girl, and I should show up to support it. Also, when I first came to LA and I was pursuing dancing as one of the things I was trying to do, that was the style that I was most excited by. It was jazz, but it was very of the moment. It had some cool street stuff to it. It was just the best. Like, that was the kind of dancer I wanted to be, a Paula Abdul dancer. And they were so great. So anyway, we go to the show. And first of all, great thing about New Kids on the Block and Paula Abdul show, no kids. There were no kids there. It's all like middle-aged folks who loved New Kids. I doubt I was the only one there that was like, Paula. But they all had their favorite New Kids. So Paula comes on. She doesn't do, her set is tight, but it's like 30 or 40 minutes. All the hits, everything you want to see. But it was really a production. Like, she really thought through how she wanted to do it. You didn't feel like, oh, well, let's get the background tracks that we do at Gay Pride and 4 dancers and we'll make it work. It was like she had a real concept to it. She was sort of telling the story of her creativity and what she likes about it. And, Cold Hearted becomes like a dance audition where she's, cutting people and keeping people. And then she talks about the clothing that she likes to do. And it's basically how she likes to create her shows as an artist. And it takes you on a little trip. She tells you a story. The choreography was fantastic. The dancers were great. They still, they had these steps, and so they created so many amazing pictures and roll-offs on the steps. And they were throwing Paula around like she was a rag doll. Like, she's 62, and she is still doing those moves. Like, I was so impressed with her dancing because there was a period of time when she was on American Idol where I think she had back problems, and it didn't look like she was going to be doing what she's doing now. And so she turned it around, and I was thrilled about that. But the best part of the Paula performance was she talked about being a Laker girl in her early days, the 80s. And she sort of said, I grew up in this forum, which is where the concert was, the Great Western Forum at the time. Now it's the Kia Forum. But it's where the Lakers played. And Paula talked about going there and being there for so long and growing up there and cheering for 3 different championships. And she talked about how after she started to find success as a choreographer, she kept her job as a Laker girl. She didn't want to move on yet. She was like playing it safe. And then after she had 2 number 1 records, she came back and played 2 shows there at the Forum where she was a Laker girl. They showed a picture. It was just very emotional. It was very beautiful. So Paula Abdul, amazing. It was on my dream board. It lived up to the hype. I was so excited to be there. So then out come the New Kids. First of all, they put on an amazing show. They are so good. And they have video projection screens on the stage that light up the steps and everything. And they look so cool. Like, it's very exciting. Visually, a lot going on. There's one point where they have these, like, plexiglass cages kind of thing out in the audience closer to where we were. So you got to be closer to the new kids. It was literally kids in cages. So they came out for a couple songs out in the middle. People lost their minds. Jordan Knight, if you told me he was going to stop the show with a vocal flourish, I would have been shocked. But he has this falsetto part of his voice, and he was wailing on this one song. I think it's I'll Be Loving You Forever, which was one of their hits. I didn't really remember it that well. But he just kind of goes on at the end in this really high falsetto. People were screaming. Yeah. And also, like Donnie Wahlberg was the bad boy of the group, and he was so like sweet at the end. He's like, we're so glad that you guys are still here, and we love you, and get home safe, and, you know, love yourself. I'm like, you're the bad boy, and you're telling me to love myself? Yeah, that's how things go. That's what happens when you live a little bit of life. There's a gay new kid, Jonathan, but he didn't really pop in the show. He didn't seem as into it as the others, you know, but God bless him. But it kind of felt like he won a contest, like, be a new kid for a night. But, you know, I'm happy we're representing, and it wouldn't have been the same without him. So, yay for all of the new kids. And I'm not a huge New Kids fan, but it was super fun. We bonded with some women around us. Notice I bond with straight women sitting next to me. That's my move. That's part of my brand. So that's okay. So where we're not, we're at Friday now. Saturday, I go see The Sandwich Ministry again. It was a play that I'd featured on the podcast. I took 3 of my friends, Anthony and Glenn and Robert, and gosh, we love that play. It held up. It was just as moving the second time. I just think it's so great. And on the way out, we were casting the movie in our heads because it's such a good play with 3 gay characters that I could see somebody making a movie out of it. And we were like, well, maybe, you know, who should it be? What movie star will swoop in? Even though the actors that played the play were so good, they should just do it. But anyway, hopefully it'll have a life. It was one of the best, probably the best play I've seen this year. I loved it so much. What was that? That was Saturday. Did anything happen Sunday? I don't know if anything happened Sunday. Monday night, I went and saw Chronicles of a Wandering Saint, directed by Thomas Gomez Bustillo, my last podcast guest, and seeing it on the big screen was such a delight. I took a few friends. They loved it too. It's such a special, unique film. I hope that when it comes to video on demand or whatever on streaming, that everyone searches it out. It's really probably my favorite movie I've seen this year. So jam-packed, full of seeing and doing and fun. So yeah, I'm exhausted from my holiday weekend. But that was fun stuff. I love it. The point is, my motto this year was do shit. And so I did. I did a lot of it. So there you go. All right. Before I let you go, I want to give a shout out to Oscar Rosario for mixing the episodes. My theme music is by Mark Daniels for Placement Music. We'll catch you next time on Dennis Anyone. Bye.